So I'm here to talk about integrations made simple. And that's the new product from Microsoft called Microsoft Flow, which is slightly different. But before I get to that, I just want to do a quick intro about myself. I love talking about myself. So I'm the engineering manager for a few different products at Microsoft. Logic Apps, BizTalk Server, BizTalk Services, as well as Microsoft Flow. I joined Microsoft a little over 3 years ago when the company I founded was acquired called Metrics Hub. So over the past few years, worked on a couple different projects inside of Azure, from Azure Monitoring, Azure Autoscale, Azure Resource Manager. So a lot of very cloud-heavy type of workloads. But one of the most exciting things about the new responsibility with integration is BizTalk Server. I mean, it's just a great legacy there on-premise. So very interesting, very exciting challenges there. So in this session, I'm going to tell what is Microsoft Flow. I think there was a show of hands earlier, and it was a small number who actually had heard of the product before. It's brand new, less than 2 weeks old. I'm going to explain why we're talking about Microsoft Flow at a BizTalk conference or integration conference. I'm going to talk about what the grow-up story looks like from Microsoft Flow to Logic Apps and other things like that. Give some quick demos, and then close it out with some ecosystem conversations and use cases that we see today. So what is Microsoft Flow? It's trying to solve this problem, which is kind of, you can tell I didn't make these slides, designers made these when it animates right here. But integration is an ongoing problem throughout all organizations, and very commonly it's solved by people. How do I go from Salesforce to Dynamics CRM? A person opens it up, copy-pastes the fields, and pastes it in. How do I go from Wunderlist to email or SharePoint to Dropbox, all those types of scenarios? We can go build integrations with Logic Apps and BizTalk Server, but there's only so much time. Most commonly inside your company that's being solved by a person, clicking, copy-pasting, dropping between these different things. So what Flow is trying to do is it's trying to help non-developers automate these integrations between all these different services, all these different applications, all these different databases. And we look at that as 4 big pillars. The first is all about getting notifications when something happens. Like, I want to get a text message, like the example, when my boss emails me, or when we actually finally get a customer to sign up for Logic Apps and they're running more than 1 million actions in a day, I want to get a text message. I want to know about it right away. Another big element of that is synchronizing files. There are so many technologies out there, Box, SharePoint, Dropbox, OneDrive, just the list goes on. I have files all over the place, but not everyone has access to all those services, so I just want to move some basic files around. I want to collect data. Some part of my company uses Salesforce. Some part of my company uses SharePoint lists for the way they look at things. Some people use Power BI. Some people use something else. I just want to easily move data around. And again, you could go do that today by building an integration with Logic Apps or BizTalk Server, but that's like taking a tank to the grocery store. It's just a little bit of overkill. And the last is just very simple approvals. I do this all the time. Every day I probably have to do 5 or 6 different approvals, expense reports, people who are asking for take vacation or want to switch to on-call, all those type of things, and it just very easily can be done with Flow. And again, this is all aimed at non-developers, so super simple, click, no code, that type of thing. But even though it's supposed to be very simple, because Flow is coming from Microsoft with our very rich integration strategy, we're able to do very complex things if you want. Like if you look at Flow compared to something like if this, then that, is it can do multiple steps in a row. It can do branching. It can do some of those very, I'd say the beginning end of the complex capabilities you see in Logic Apps, you can also do in Flow. And what's great about that is it allows just people who are just putting their toes in the water to connect some things together can start to use these more advanced capabilities to integrate these systems together. And just like Jim talked about earlier today, we have this great connector ecosystem. Microsoft already is building dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these connectors, and we're going to keep doing that. We have a whole team of like 50 people who are just building connectors. But we're also opening that up to third parties and key partners, so they too can also go build connectors. But it's all about each and every week, we're going to release more and more connectivity options for not only Microsoft Flow, but also for Logic Apps, and also because of the new Logic Apps to BizTalk Server integration, also for BizTalk Server. These same connectors are used across all these different services. Because Flow is a lot easier, we don't want you straight into that workflow designer where I add step by step like you do with Logic Apps. We don't launch you into Visual Studio or anything like that. Instead, the whole experience is very much tailored around what we call templates. These are very basic, specific, targeted silo scenarios that we give pre-packaged workflows for. And you almost like going to the grocery store, you can kind of browse these things, find the ones that are the right fit, that are interesting to you, pick it and provision it, and just in a few minutes you can have something stood up that actually is solving a real problem for the non-developers out there. And when you click into one of these templates, you get a little bit more explanation, focusing on what services are involved, what is it actually trying to do. Like in this case, I want to put my attachments from email into a SharePoint library. It's not talking about if there's a new file in my email, look at it. If it's more than a meg, put it in SharePoint library. Like, all those things are kind of hidden behind the scenes. You can still get to it, but it's much more about focusing on those non-developer scenarios so that people can go without having to understand the underlying details to get it working. Another great thing about these templates is not only does Microsoft publish them, and there's hundreds of them already, there's also the ability for the community to go publish templates. So if you see something interesting here, or you have a service that you own or build for your company, you can not only expose the connector through our ecosystem, you can also come and expose these templates so people can just drop them on very easily to go and connect with your particular service. And this kind of flywheel effect is how you not only is it good for partners, it's also good for customers in the end. When you drill into this, there's a whole bunch of, this is kind of like a stat sheet. I'll actually demo this, and kind of what it says, like a picture is worth 1,000 words, like a demo is worth 1,000,000 words, so I wouldn't pay too much attention to the text on the slide. But at the highest level is kind of just what I was saying in the previous one, is it's about letting you know what this is trying to do, not the internal nuts and bolts of how it's being done. It does things like tell you how many times it's been used by people outside in the world, and also it gives you options to easily share within your company and various other things like that. But what's great and what's planned is the ability for people to publish these templates just for their organization, or just for their company, or just for the group they work with, so that you don't have to give it to the world, but you, like the example that we want to work on inside Microsoft is a concept called bug jail. I don't know if anybody else uses that, but if you have something like more than 10 bugs that are over a week old assigned to you as a dev, you're supposed to work and fix those bugs before you go work on something else. That'd be a great template to publish within Microsoft that people can instantiate for themselves. But to do that, we kind of need to have the ability to have an organizational boundary. So that was the very, very simple case. But if you want, in Flow, you can kind of break the glass and start from scratch and actually use the same Logic Apps Designer, which I think you've seen many, many times today, to go construct a flow from scratch. And it has the same elements, the same types of drop-downs and file picker and file explorer that make it very easy to go from completely blank slate to something that's step 1, step 2, step 3. And the things that you create in Flow, just by the fact of their non-developers using it, it's going to end up being a lot simpler. You're not going to see XML, you're not going to see XPath, you're not going to see XML schema. That's just not the type of workload that these customers are going to be able to do. But they are able to do some of that very simple stitching together of different services. And a year ago, we kind of, I'd say, we had a little bit of confusion ourselves of, we took Logic Apps and we were making it a little too simple to try to actually go and meet this type of very easy workflow experience and consumption. But by separating it out and having Flow be the one that goes after the non-developers and have Logic Apps and BizTalk be the products that go after the developers in IT, we're able to allow kind of these products to evolve independently and focus much more on the ideal use case and ideal scenarios for the respective customers. But yeah, some more kind of UI that's exposed in Flow is this very easy debug view. So when a flow actually runs, you can come here, and it's kind of hard to see probably on the screen, but there's little green boxes in the upper right that basically give you a visual representation of when the flow ran, overlaid on top of that designer experience you used during creation. And this is something that's there today, and we're also going to take back and put inside Logic Apps. But it's all about keeping it as easy as possible for people to easily see what steps failed, what was the execution path taken by my flow, as well as expand those cards and look at the actual properties that are exposed. Like in the bottom left card, you can actually see, hey, this is the contents of the email that was sent. Which can be useful if you're trying to debug something where the email went to somebody else. You can go see, hey, what was the email they actually got? What was their response to this email? you can go pull all of that up inside this debug view. Another important part of that is the concept of connections, which is something that features very prominently in Flow. And these are basically credentials. So if I, say, want to log into a Dropbox account, I may log in once, but then use those credentials across 10, 15 different flows. Same thing for, I think in this example, I have like SharePoint Online and Excel. So those are other examples. I can create configuration for a connection, and that exists kind of outside of my flow and is referenced. That way, and a very important issue is, hey, your password expires, you change your password, something breaks, you can go update that connection in one place, and it will automatically be reflected in all the flows that are out there running. So this is kind of just, I'd say, a quick whirlwind tour of what the Flow product looks like. But now that you've probably heard about it, you really think, why are we talking about flows? This is not, say, something a developer or IT pro would use, but something that a business user would use. And the reason is kind of this conference and kind of what we're talking about is it's much more about a holistic integration strategy from Microsoft, which is not just about the more advanced use cases. It's also about the really endless point-to-point integrations that that information workers and business users face each and every day that largely go unmet, just because it's too much overhead to go push that through a central integration group. So what we can do is we can now basically enable those users to be self-service. We can bring APIs from Logic Apps, BizTalk Server, expose them here, but once I'm an end user, I can just go create my flows very easily without having to go ask for someone to go create something in BizTalk Server or go create a Logic app. I can just do it completely on my own. And that's just really to the second point, it's just a limited number of resources. You don't want, and when I give the demo later, you'll see the kind of the silliness of the example, but it would be crazy to make it so that every time anyone in your organization wanted to do that, you had to go and actually ask someone to go create a Logic app or something like that. Another big element of it, and why it's particularly important to people who are developing those connectors or APIs for Logic apps, is that you'll be able to bring the same assets between Logic apps to Flow and vice versa. So if you say go expose an API to some key internal line of business data that you want to use from Logic apps or BizTalk Server, you can now also register that with Flow. So the non-developers in your organization can come to Flow and actually see that as an option, and they can use it without having to go talk to IT. And what's great about this is, again, it's self-service. I can sit down one morning and I can automate things that I have to spend 15, 20, 30 minutes on each and every day. And within Microsoft, this is a great example. We have all these core business APIs or like engineering APIs, but everybody wants to integrate them to automate. So like the easiest example is, hey, we have live site incidences that are kind of happening all the time, and we have people who are on call to go respond to them, but we want to generate a report every day at 9 a.m. Before Flow, that was a person on each team would go and run a query on a website, gather the data, formulate it into a table, and then email it out every morning. Now with Flow, they can just very easily consume the API published by central people in Microsoft to actually automate that part of their day-to-day job. And again, it's just another tool for us kind of in that toolkit when it comes to figuring out what does integration look like for your company. Kind of this is a diagram that we like to show, but basically who is the audience for Flow versus who is the audience for Logic Apps versus who is the audience for BizTalk Server. Flow is all about business users and business specialists, and the way we kind of think about it is that there's a lot of those people out there. Those are all people who use Office, but they're not very sophisticated. If you ask them what is a for each loop or what is XML, they look at you like you're speaking a different language. So for those people, they can go use Flow and get a lot of value out of the integration assets that we're all working on together as part of Logic Apps and BizTalk Server. And then for those people who are IT pro or developers, they actually can go to that other end. There aren't as many of them. There are a lot more people that use Office than use Visual Studio, but they're way more sophisticated. Actually can do mission critical, low latency, super scalable, super reliable type workloads you would go use Logic Apps or BizTalk Server for. You wouldn't be using Flow for that. And that kind of a common question as we released Flow, 2 weeks ago, people would ask us, when do I use Flow or when do I use Logic Apps? The easiest test, in my experience, of when you should use Flow is when you can develop in production. When it's okay that I can go edit the running Flow, then it's probably okay for it to be done in Flow. if while editing it you're afraid, oh, what if it's wrong? What if I miss a message? What if something breaks? Then that's when you shouldn't be using Flow anymore. You're really doing a development type thing. Because in Flow, generally, the worst thing that happens if it doesn't run is someone has to go manually do it. In the case of like a Logic app or a BizTalk, if it doesn't run, that could be your business doesn't get paid, or you break some major partner integration. So that's kind of a good way to think about it. And the rule of thumb that we say for the end users, when people say, hey, what website should I go to create my Flow? Hey, if your normal job is working at Visual Studio, Azure Portal, then again, Logic Apps or BizTalk Server is the place you want to go. Because you're going to be comfortable, you're going to understand those concepts, and it's going to integrate a lot better with what you do each and every day. That's because you have the application lifecycle management, like Jeff demoed earlier, or the ability to go monitor it and alert on it when it's in production. You're going to be able to do all of that much more so with Logic Apps or BizTalk Server. But if you work in Excel or Outlook or Access and SharePoint, then Flow is probably the right place to go. So which means like us individually, like me as a developer, my work would be in Logic Apps or BizTalk Server, but I may expose functionality or APIs or connectors that I build in for those scenarios through Flow, so other people in the organization and other people in the company can actually get value from our integration investments, even if they may not understand what integration is. So that's kind of one of the really exciting parts about Flow in terms of what it does for this community. So the next section I'll talk about growing up. And what I mean by that is there will be a lot of things, and you'll probably see this over time as well. People will start in Flow thinking, oh, this is easy. I can just put it in Flow. I don't need source control. I don't need testing environments. I don't need pre-prod. And then over time, they'll realize, oh my gosh, now all the new hires in my company are going through a Flow in my personal account. We probably shouldn't be doing that. I probably should move that to a Logic app. So I can basically start simple with Flow, and then based on how complex or how important it gets to the business, I can very easily graduate up into Logic apps. And today, there's some finagling you have to do to make that work, but in the next few months or by the end of the year, it'll just be a single click button where basically I can go to a Flow and say, move this to a Logic app, and it'll just sprout into my Azure subscription. And what's great about that is, again, you can allow people to go out, farm out, have hundreds or thousands of flows, or tens of thousands in your organization, and then they go, oh my gosh, of those tens of thousands, these 100 are actually too important, like we shouldn't be syncing Salesforce in our on-prem database and Flow, can you please take it over? Not only will it be very easy in terms of an experience, but also everything that Flow can do, Logic Apps can also do, if not more. And that's largely because of underneath the hood, Flow is just an easier, stripped down, streamlined SaaS version experience for building these workflows on top of Logic Apps. When someone goes to flow.microsoft.com and saves a Flow, that's just as creating a Logic app behind the scenes. They just don't know it. They don't have an Azure subscription or anything like that. And for that reason, that's why we can very easily share that visual designer you see between Flow and Logic Apps. It's because at the end, it's just creating a Logic app. But also, it means that Flow can never, ever do something that Logic Apps cannot do. Logic Apps will always be a strict superset. And that's because a Flow is just a Logic app, which makes that grow-up story that I talked about earlier basically guaranteed to always work. It's baked into the architecture, baked into kind of the design. So that grow-up story is going to be a very fundamental and foundational piece to how this will actually roll out over the coming years. And
what do you mean by promote as a Logic app? If it is a Logic app behind the scenes,
so the question was, what does it mean to promote a Flow to a Logic app? So when a Flow creates a Logic app, it doesn't create it in the customer's Azure subscription. It creates it in like my Azure subscription. And what promotion would be is just moving it from my Azure subscription to your Azure subscription. Because you can't, there's no way for you to see the Logic app backing the Flow. That's completely hidden from the user. But when you promote it, it will then appear in your Azure portal. So that's what promotion means. So kind of, again, going back to how do we bring Flow into the integration toolchain? How do we make it kind of be a better together picture? I think this is the most interesting bit. And this is something we're seeing within Microsoft as well, is that APIs that integrate with Logic apps can be brought as is to Flow. And once it's brought to Flow, you can then share just API with people in your company. So I can share it with just Kevin, or I can share it with all of Microsoft. And they'll actually see those APIs light up in Flow. And that just starts to unlock all kinds of scenarios where, again, before I really wish we could have integrated these systems together, but we just didn't have the time or the resources. People are empowered to go do that themselves. And yeah, there's just all kinds of very interesting things already in just 2 weeks people have started to do. And kind of the thing is, again, to belabor that point is EDI or connecting to SAP, you probably, please don't do that in Flow. That should be done really in Logic Apps or BizTalk Server. And kind of, yeah, the other bit is just, yeah, build once, connect to any level. And when I say that, that's because we're making investments on 2 sides. Because Flow is just using Logic Apps and its connection infrastructure, and because we now have BizTalk Server able to connect to Logic Apps and its connection infrastructure, we're able to have people here develop things, or third parties or open source, create connectors and really have them used in any of those 3 products. And that's kind of how we think that we can get this huge critical mass and momentum behind this growing ecosystem. From a UI point of view, this is how easy it is to bring your own API. Basically, you just choose a name for it, like I can say Microsoft Shuttle API to order like cabs between Microsoft buildings. I upload a Swagger, which is what we also use in Logic Apps, and is very easily generated from other services like API apps or API management within Azure. I can then also upload an icon so it looks pretty for people who will use it, so it actually feels very professional. And I basically just save it. And when I save this custom API, it supports many different kinds of authentication, whether it be basic auth, OAuth, client credential, client secret. So it can actually be very secure when it communicates between Flow and that API. But this is just an easy way where the same APIs you'd seen in Logic Apps Designer and the BizTalk Server adapter that we demoed earlier, you can actually go expose those right through Flow. So kind of to distill it all the way down to really 2 pieces for our partners or for in-house IT or dev. For partners, it's brand new market that didn't really use integration before. They may not realize they're using integration now, but that's what they really are using. So a lot of those same skills and technology and kind of wisdom that's come from working with BizTalk Server or Logic Apps, you can now bring to this very diverse and growing set of customers. For in-house and dev, like in the company, for the rest of your organization, you can also focus on building those, like we call them the building blocks or the atomic units, like those APIs or connectors, so that you can then expose them in Flow in addition to using them in Logic Apps. But by exposing them in Flow, you can empower the individual groups, the individual departments to go do their own kind of like truly citizen integrations to go connect these different systems together. And that's just the point really is using the right tool at the right time. And that's kind of the overarching theme. You're on-premise, you don't want to move to cloud, BizTalk Server is a place to go. You want to move some things to cloud, you can mix BizTalk Server and Logic Apps. You want to allow business users to create their own workflows, then use Flow. And kind of all of those things are just what is most appropriate for that person is kind of what we're talking about with the Microsoft integration strategy. And because we have this same thread going between all of them, which is the APIs and connectors, you can really have investments in one place carry tons of value across the entire stack. So now I'll give some demos to kind of show, hopefully, how easy it can be. Yes, exactly. It's time for the Twitter to Dropbox demo, everybody. No. But again, kind of that's some of the clarity that we got is, hey, there are people that is an important scenario, not Twitter to Dropbox maybe, but I want to connect email and Wunderlist. People, like if your CEO says, hey, when you email me something important, I want it to go to my Wunderlist, to-do list, which is a demo I'm going to do. If they ask you to put that in BizTalk or Logic Apps, you'd be like, are you crazy? You don't want me to go build that? But hey, they can go do that themselves in like literally 30 seconds. So I mean, it's all about those very simple things that were just too small, like ants or whatever, basically, to go build before. So this is the Flow, flow.microsoft.com website. It's public. Like, I think it went April 29th or something, so 2 weeks ago. But as you can kind of see, it has your favorite services and some of these templates. And again, it's all about being super easy for someone to come here and actually get started. So I'll click on this one. This is kind of that example that I was talking about earlier of here's the simple screen to describe the template. Again, I don't see a workflow. I don't understand that there's like a step 1 and a step 2 and APIs and Swagger. It's all about, hey, I want to create a to-do item in Wunderlist whenever there's a high importance email. And kind of a little description. You can see who used it, the count, that type of thing. So you just click this, and eventually you'll see an experience that should be familiar. So it basically launches a page where it asks me which connections I want to use. I didn't plug in my Wi-Fi, or I'm using Wi-Fi, so that may have been a big mistake. We'll see. Yeah, so basically what's happening here is it's asking me, hey, you said you want to connect email to Wunderlist. What email account and what Wunderlist account? That's easy things for me to understand. I don't have to understand what's going on behind the scenes. I click continue. I've already logged in because I don't trust myself typing passwords during the demo. Basically, hey, this is the familiar designer now that we all know and love from Logic Apps, hopefully. And it's already pre-populated. If you look, it's already done things like taking the subject from the email and put it in the Wunderlist title. If I go to on new email, I can see, hey, it's looking at my inbox. I can change that folder. It's looking for high importance as well. If I click the ... But this was minimized by default, so I don't even have to go look in here and see high importance. Let's see. In this case, you can do a subject filter, which is, hey, if the incoming email has this in its subject, I'm able to I can just filter on it right here. So I'll say integrate 2016, high importance. If I get that, I want to put it into this list. And again, this is very similar to Logic Apps. There's goodness for Logic Apps Designer as well. But for this type of user, if you told them, hey, enter the list number, like the list GUID, they would just like close a product and never come back. So we have to give this very easy experience where I can go choose. This is a to-do list I created beforehand. I choose it. Basically, I say create to-do item in Wunderlist for important emails. So I'll save that flow. And that's all it takes to go set something up. So let's say, oh, it's already in use. OK, integrate. 2016. Start saving the flow. I'll go over and get ready to send my email to myself. Let's see. Here we go. Yes, this is the email. Did you finish the Integrate 2016 demo? High importance. It's a little late to send that to myself, but basically, this is the email I want to test. And just, let's see. The flow is created. It's waiting here, nice and easy. I send this email. And if all goes according to plan, I just saw the email land. In just 15 seconds or so, I should go see a reflection of that to give me a live debugging testing view inside the flow experience. So if I come back here, it'll just basically check. It'll wait for the flow to run. When it does, it's going to swap this over to the debug view. That's what's happening right now. And this kind of goes back to, as a business user, debug sounds scary. What this is doing is basically testing it. We don't even use any of those words. But you see, hey, because I just created this flow and I went and sent the email, it fired, it actually gave me the debug view right in line. I can see, hey, this was able to successfully check for a new email. And after it checked for the new email, I was able to come back here and create the task. And both of these were successful. And today, you can see there's some usability tweaks to make. If I go look in this property, there's some JSON, so that's a little scary to somebody. But the whole idea is, again, just in 30 seconds, I can create this flow, I can test it, and make sure it works. And hopefully,
implemented in Logic Apps also, like the inline debugger?
Yes, it will be. So yeah, exactly. So for some of the same concepts that we develop for Flow, since there's a lot of shared infrastructure and investment, we're going to go bring those to Logic Apps as well. So this same type of experience we'll have in Logic Apps. I'd say from a prioritization exercise, it's a little bit different. For a Flow user, without this thing, they're going to be drowning. Because I have to go to a run history, what's a run history, that type of thing. But for Logic Apps users, a little more sophisticated. They can have some rough edges there. I'd say the bigger gaps there are making sure the enterprise integration pack works correctly. We support XML better. We support SQL XML, that type of thing, instead of debug views. So kind of here's a nice little view of that. And to make sure that I did the real thing, here we go. I had a test one before. Did you finish Integrate 2016 demo? Sync to Wunderlist. And you can kind of basically keep sending, I can have any number of these flows running to basically check and do these very simple things. And today, I could go do this in Wunderlist. I could go, I got a really important email about Integrate 2016. I'll open the Wunderlist app. I'll write down the comments, or I'll copy paste it. And but with using Flow, I can go automate all those little things that take 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes there, such that I get all that time back. So I'm kind of free to focus on my actual job instead of just moving data around. And that's kind of a lot of what we try to do anyway with integration, is just making things much more automatic and making so that there aren't people in between important processes. So that's kind of a very simple, so that's a test case of my flow. This is another example I like to show. This is a real flow I use for myself. So I'm trying to hire like crazy, so if you want to be a dev, talk to me afterwards. But as part of that, I get lots of emails about resume submissions. They go straight to my inbox. And it's super onerous. Every day I wake up, and I have like 15 resume submissions, and I have to scan all of them. And okay, good, bad, 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 good. And then based on the good ones, I have to go type a response and say, oh, thank you for submitting your resume, but can you please follow up? Can you talk to this person on my team for a text screen? Basically, like a very manual process. It used to be 15 minutes I would do every morning. I'd wake up, do that, whatever, from bed. Now I created a flow to automate that process. So basically, when I get a new email, which filters on internal resume submission, that's just what the email looks like. And that's what's great. There is some system in Microsoft IT that handles resume submissions. I don't know how it works, but it all ultimately results in an email to my inbox. So that's kind of the adapter to my life. So when I get that new email, it sends an approval email to myself. And this is an action baked natively inside Flow. And inside that email, it says, hey, would you like to do a text screen for this person? If I click yes, it starts the process to do a text screen. If I click no, I say, sorry, not interested, best of luck, so on, follow up, instead of having to write all that email. So here we can check in the condition for based on the approval email. It says basically, what did I choose, approve or deny? Should I text screen them or not? If I did approve it, I delay it for a little bit. I have 1 minute because I've been demoing it. Normally it's like 17 minutes. And I do that because I think they'd get weirded out if they knew I was using a flow to respond to the resume submission. But so I have like a different one for the approve and deny. So I delay for a little bit and I say, hey, thanks so much for applying. And I can see I get the CC, the subject. Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
I got this email.
Well, it's good you got this one, not the other one. But so the whole idea is, hey, I can just send them, hey, thanks for applying. I really appreciate reaching out. Here's a bunch of information about the team. Here's where you can go to the next steps. Can you please share a more detailed version of your resume, stuff like that. And then if I approve it, I email other people on my team, like basically the leads who actually tend to do the text screen. And I say, hey, can you go do a text screen with this person, like offline? And I forward them the resume and the contents and say, hey, can you please go do a text screen? And just now what used to take me 15 minutes, I can do in like 30 seconds. Just no, yes, and then done. It's pretty awesome. And then kind of here's a sad email. I won't show you guys the contents, but you don't want to get that email. But basically, But I mean, this is kind of an example. Like, sure, I'm a dev. I could have go built a Logic app, but again, it's like driving a tank to the grocery store. It's a lot of machinery to do something that, hey, if it blows up, not a big deal. I don't need to check this into Git. If it doesn't work, oh well. I spend some extra time that morning doing my email. So that's kind of, and the same, just like we looked at that debug view, we also have the ability to go look at any run in the past and actually look, make sure I don't show any emails in the history. Yeah, this is the same debug view, but you can go back and look after the fact. This is someone that got a yes, let's text screen them. So, but kind of so that's just the same, very simple, and this is like 90% of the user experience that exists in Flow. It's all about getting someone in real quick, having them use the connectors that they have from Logic apps or whatever, or the ones that we've also built, get value, and then not come back. I mean, a good day is I don't have to come to Flow. I just have my 10, 15 flows automating a bunch of stuff for me. So that's kind of like the basic example on the website. There's another cool thing I'll show really quick, which is an important part of Flow. Did anyone watch Integration Monday this week? Anyone? Okay, good. So, we've been working with the SharePoint team within Microsoft, and a lot of the thing is, hey, I'm looking at a SharePoint website, and I'm looking at something, man, I come here every day to change a field. Wouldn't it be great to automate? So we've been working with them in SharePoint, starting now, only for select customers rolling out over the next couple of months. There's going to be this big Add Flow button here in all the SharePoint lists, the SharePoint sites, and I can just click right here, and it can go, hey, here are some suggestions of automations you can do on top of this SharePoint list. And today you can't do this, but our plan is even within a company, you'll be able to publish recommendations here as well. Like if you have your own internal systems, you could publish a connector for it. You can then publish a template for it, and then you can have that template show up here. So I won't go through. There's a lot of great videos of this, but like here's an example of the common demo, which is when something's added to Dynamics CRM, copy it over to the SharePoint list. You kind of give it a second to load. But basically, this is again all template. I don't have to. This is kind of it's populating all the fields that it wants to show me. So boom, it's done. I actually didn't really have to do anything to get this template to work. All it did is like when a order is created in my dynamic CRM, sync it into the SharePoint list. And the scenario for that is I may have the people who are actually out processing the orders, but the people who, if it's above a certain amount, require an approval to give a discount, they actually use SharePoint. They don't want to go to CRM. So they can go just use this to synchronize into SharePoint and then vice versa. This one's a little more advanced compared to the typical flow. But again, it's like the Dropbox or Twitter example. It's connecting SaaS products. It's all about being personal. It's all about automating my life as opposed to like Logic Apps or Bitstock Server, which is about automating your organization. So I won't do that just for the interest of time. But yeah, you create an order in CRM and it would sync to the SharePoint list. That's kind of what this is. These are all things synced from dynamic CRM based on that flow. Yeah. So what are some use cases? I mean, it's been out there. You saw my use case, my pride and joy when it comes to flow. But there are a lot of examples out there that we already know from customers. One of the very common ones is basically, I want to enrich some data I work with every day. And that was like the example of the dynamic CRM to SharePoint's example. I have some data over here. Wouldn't it be great if instead of having to open 2 tabs every day, I could just go to one place and see all my data together? It's kind of like common enrichment scenario. The second is very simple approval workflows, because the example, I'm very trusty in technology, but there are some things like approving or rejecting a candidate. I don't want to have that go to some machine decide. I do want to review it, and I say yes or no. And this is kind of an easy way for someone to gradually move to greater automation in their life. We can have the flow do a bunch of logic, and then still it asks for a person, do you want me to do the last step to actually commit the change? That you can do with approve or deny. Or you can just do the classical approval scenarios, and I have a neat example from a blog post in a second. And the third one, which we saw a lot, was capturing data visualizations, which is basically I have some data somewhere, and that data is not in a form that can be consumed by like Power BI or Excel. And I can just use Flow, because Flow has all these connectors to connect to that other source, translate it, and store it in SQL, and store it in an Excel file, store it in a CSV, whatever. Excel is actually very common to do this. People just create an Excel file in Dropbox. And hey, before I'd have to go to all these different tools with no good visualization, but now I can easily, every day, generate an Excel file that visualizes it. And one of my favorites I didn't put in the deck is someone created a flow to go like all Donald Trump tweets, to grab them and do like a sentiment analysis and generate a Power BI dashboard. It's interesting. It's too charged of a topic to talk in more detail, I think. But anyway, so here's one from a blog post from Daniel Laskowitz. I just pulled offline. Basically, the example he gave was, I want to have a SharePoint list where people go and request vacation. And based on the vacation that they request, I either want to approve or deny based on some rules. And if I approve, I go ahead, go on vacation, and could put something like on a calendar. Or if I deny, it says, sorry, you can't do it because of some reason. And kind of, there's like a little GIF here that animates showing someone setting the request in SharePoint with the date time picker. And then it generates that email in the bottom right, and you click approve or deny. And that's kind of an example of, like, think of how annoying that can be if you have a team of like 25 people and you have to orchestrate, oh, are you on call this week? Do you have a support engagement? Are other people on vacation this week? You could just encapsulate that all in a flow, like in 15 minutes. I mean, it's a little more advanced, but you don't need to necessarily get IT involved. You don't necessarily need to get a dev involved, because people can whip this together. And again, kind of imagine if someone came and said, hey, I want the next integration you do in BizTalk to be this. You'd be like, no way, that's just not the top priority for me. So here's another one of basically a flow to pull data into Power BI. And this one's basically, this is going out, pulling data from like Twitter, capturing it at a regular interval based on some filters, and then putting it into a SQL database. There's actually a lot of blog posts like this already in just 2 weeks if you want to go read about them. And I think, let me get this is from John White. It's a great blog post. But basically, it goes and pulls from Twitter into some format that Power BI can actually understand. You can also do like this into straight an Excel file. That one is in particular very common. And you get all the great visuals that Power BI gives you. So next section is ecosystem. So kind of in the quick little demo I gave where you saw add flow as a button inside of SharePoint, that's a big bet for us as a company and with our partners is Flow is about, I want to integrate something that I personally use with something else. So to make that way easier, you can solve half the problem by putting Flow in that something else or wherever they're using. So I'm in SharePoint. You already know I'm looking at a SharePoint list, so you know I use SharePoint, and you know that probably there is some automation that would help me work with this SharePoint list. And this is going to focus within Microsoft very much on information worker tools, like the Office products are the best example, and not dev tools. Like this is not something that's going to be prioritized to be in Visual Studio or the Azure portal. Because again, those probably you should be using Logic Apps if you're already in those tools. The SharePoint Online one is already in private preview. It's they have a gradual rollout process over, I don't know, 10 weeks or something before everybody in SharePoint Online can see it. Yeah, so this embedding is a very important detail, and again is something that we probably wouldn't do with Logic Apps or BizTalk server. You wouldn't have like add BizTalk orchestration in SharePoint just because the use cases are different, the scenarios I'm trying to do are different. And it's not just for Microsoft products. For Flow, one of our big bets is we're also going to expose an SDK, so any other product out there can also embed that same experience you saw in SharePoint inside of your own application, which means if within your company you have line of business applications or a custom application, you can actually add an Add Flow button in there, and it can use the connector or API you built for Logic Apps. So that's all about making it so people can very easily do automation on top of things they know and understand. And that's one of the big investments for Flow. And that brings a whole slew of great things for Logic Apps and BizTalk Server as well. And just as a quick thing, there's another product from Microsoft related to Flow called Power Apps. I don't know, has anyone heard of Power Apps? Oh, wow, a lot of people. Okay, so then, yeah, so Power Apps is all about building those line of business apps very quickly and very easily on top of these various connectors, as well as a couple different data technologies. And what's great is Power Apps is another huge investment from Microsoft. Not part of my team, but another huge investment, but they use the same connector. So if you build a connector for Logic Apps, you just build a connector, you can use it in Logic Apps, BizTalk Server, Flow, Power Apps, and there's functions, Azure Functions, and there's even more services in Microsoft that are all coalescing on that infrastructure. So it's a great way for you within an organization to go build connectivity and kind of just enrich all these services very, very easily. And from within a Power App, running a flow is a key element of it. If you imagine I collect data with a form, and then I click Submit, that probably triggers a workflow. So Flow is also integrated very tightly with Power Apps to go do that. Kind of this is like the picture we talk about between those two services together, which is basically Power Apps is all about acting on data, taking actions, working, basically manipulating information in forms. And Flow is all about automating. So when a change happens in that data, or when something happens in the background, or I do something, I want you to automate that. And that's kind of the two big offerings that Microsoft is doing in simplifying line of business app development. And kind of the four items we talk about: extensible, connected, secure, fast. Those are kind of all the adjectives we talk about for Flow and Power Apps. And kind of just one thing I want to throw in, because I know I'll get a bunch of questions about this afterwards, is what about security? It's a very common question about flows. When it were released, I got like this huge red bang email from, I say, a very, very large Microsoft customer saying, we have to shut off Flow right now or else we're going to not use Office anymore. And that was because they saw like something we had, which was copy data out of SharePoint into a Dropbox, which is kind of terrifying if you think about it. Say we work in like pharmaceuticals or something very sensitive. I don't want people creating a bunch of flows that copy all my sensitive data out of my organization. I will just lose complete control over it. So, I mean, and not to mention, hey, Flow stores all your credentials and it's multi-tenant server, that type of thing. So, I mean, we have the normal security precautions with Flow that you see for any Microsoft service product. That's data sovereignty. EU data stays in the EU. US data stays in the US. We encrypt all sensitive information like keys, tokens, and so on. It's just very standard practices. And you can't do this right now, but something that we're going to do very soon for Flow is organizations can come in and say, hey, I don't want people to use Dropbox because that's not where we want data to go. Can you please disable Dropbox as a connector for my organization? Instead, tell them they have to use OneDrive for business, or I don't know, use Box or something. Those will all be knobs, they're bells and whistles that will expose that you can basically have like anti-ACLs within an organization. And then kind of another key point is really, really care about security for your automation, like it's financial data, payment data, mission critical data, Flow is probably not the right tool for you. Development and production is not good when the data you're doing is has all kinds of compliance, certifications associated with it. You don't want people to go, oops, I accidentally copied it to the wrong SQL database, which is outside our firewall, and there went like 10,000 credit card numbers. So when you feel yourself doing that, you probably shouldn't be using Flow anymore. You should probably be using Logic Apps or BizTalk Server. And the other great thing in the case of Logic Apps is part of Azure, which comes with a whole host of security features on top, like Azure Cloud Policy, Azure Audit Logs, Azure Security Center, and these things are all basically to make sure that you have the appropriate governance and compliance when it comes to managing these workflows and managing this automation and connectors. So that's a whole lot of content. So I was like, just do a quick recap. If I say, if you're only going to remember 3 things from the entire session, the first is that Microsoft Flow is all about bringing integration to the non-developers, the non-IT. It's a big opportunity for the developers and for IT because they can go and actually bring integration to a whole set of people in their organization that otherwise would have never used integration. Number 2, which is BizTalk and Logic Apps cover different advanced scenarios. Again, those are products for developers, for IT. And just hopefully make it very clear kind of the two places or where you go in terms of products if you're in one of those 2 camps. And the third is investments you make in BizTalk 2016 and Logic Apps will also pay dividends with Flow. That's all a part about the bigger integration strategy for Microsoft. We have this big investment, big organization, all aligned around making integration super compelling and very, very relevant going forward. And a big part of that is making Logic Apps, BizTalk Server, Flow, Power Apps, whatever, all play very well together. So hopefully those 3 things. Maybe the 4th, which is my talk was better than Jeff's, but yeah. So here are the resources. If you want to go take a look, these are the Flow resources. Yep. I thought we'd share out the slide. No. I can do some hover text if you guys want me to. No. Yeah, so I can also, you just search Microsoft Flow service website. But yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so that's kind of some places you want to get more. And I'll be around, of course, today and tomorrow if you want to ask more questions one-on-one. And if anyone has any questions based on the content just presented, now is your chance.
So you just really might hear.
Yes. Right here, next 24 hours. So no. Questions? Awesome. Oh.
Are you going to open it up to Microsoft account?
That's a great question. So the question was, today it's only available for work and student accounts. Will you open it for Microsoft accounts? The plan is yes. The exact timeline, there are some intricacies of how login works within Microsoft that make that timeline hard for me to give you something firmer. But like as an example, Azure supports those like personal accounts as well as work organizations, so it makes sense, particularly when you have the grow up story with Logic Apps and stuff like that. So, but yeah. The question was, what is the revenue model? Revenue? Who needs revenue? No. So today, the concept of Flow is completely free while it's in preview. The long-term plan is a per-user licensing model. So per user who goes in and creates a Flow. It'll be cheap, like very cheap. Just that's kind of how I can't say the exact price that we're thinking, but the idea really for this type of product is, again, the base is much larger, and the depth of the product is much shallower compared to BizTalk Server and Logic Apps. So you go for a lot more users paying a lot less. But yeah, so it'll be per user licensing. Cool.
Basically, this thing is up in cloud, but it's there.
Yes. Yeah. The question was, this whole thing is in the cloud. The answer is yes. It's all running in the cloud. Will we run it on premise? Today, the current thinking, I don't want to say yes or no. I'd say not in the immediate or the medium term will we go on premise. Much more focused on just building out the product in the cloud. Just because a lot of the automation people do, it's not that mission critical data. Like if I'm connecting between a few different SaaS products, that's probably okay to run completely in the cloud. But we do have, just like Logic Apps, we will have the ability to connect on-premise to your data. So say you use SharePoint Server, not SharePoint Online, you will be able to connect to it even though this runs in the cloud. And you can do that in a compliant, secure way as well. So, but, cool. Great. Okay, sorry, Yep. Yeah, the question was, will there be a community and a model for sharing the templates with others? Yes, so today we already have the ability where if you create a custom flow, like from scratch, when you save it, we say, hey, we saw you create a brand new flow. Do you want to publish it to the community? It's awesome. And you just say yes, and then it goes. We have to approve it, and it appears there. So absolutely. So yeah, so that's there today, go public. That's why, and then longer term is you want to make sure that you can publish it just to your company. Because like, hey, do you want to publish this as a template just to other people in your company? Because then you can, for example, reference connectors specific to your organization. Yep. Cool. All right. And I'll be available after the break. But thanks, everybody.